Hey everyone, I'm Jay, and today we're going to talk about some very basics of what makes an HTML page, and we'll have a look at uh, this code right here and what it looks like in page form. Uh, First, I want to talk about what you have visible right here. So for some of my classes, we'll be using just a text editor, and my text editor of choice for developing is Sublime Text. You get that for free from Sublime Text. I think they're on version 4. That's new. Sublime Text is free. It's great. You can pay them if you like it. You don't have to. Not a requirement. I have zoomed in my text a little bit so that you can see it. And then for some other classes that I do, we'll be using Dreamweaver. So this is Dreamweaver. At the moment, I'm only showing code view because this video is about the basic code of the web page, what it does, what you need for the basics. If you're doing this in Dreamweaver, most of this is done for you. But if you have to do it by hand, you're coding by hand, you'll have to build this. My recommendation is copy and paste, right? But let's talk about the parts here. I'm going to look at the Sublime Text version, right? Only because I like the colors. Okay, so the first line, this is the Doctype HTML or document type. In the old days of web programming, we had a lot of other doc types. We had HTML4, we had HTML5, we had different versions of HTML4, but now in HTML5, actually, we're just calling it Doctype HTML. HTML5 introduced a new standard that is a good enough standard that we don't have to worry about different rules so much anymore as we used to. And we used to have things like transitional and strict and whatnot. Now it's just Doctype HTML. And you'll notice there's all these greater than and less than symbols. These denote the XML elements, okay? HTML has been written in XML format for kind of a while now. It's always been very similar to XML. The rules have not always been the same, but in HTML5 now, all HTML should also be valid XML. So if you're familiar with XML, this will come very naturally to you. If not, it's still not that difficult. Essentially, all the elements, you can have elements with child elements, and those elements can have child elements, and you can set attributes and things of that nature. All right, so the first element is the HTML element itself. And you'll see it starts here and it ends way down here. And you can tell the difference between the beginning and the end of an element because the end is going to have this slash and the beginning is just going to be the name of the element. You also hear me call these tags sometimes, elements and tags. It's the same thing, just a different word for the same thing. If I call it a tag, it's probably because we're just looking at the text of the code. And if I call it an element, it's probably because I'm thinking about it more as an actual element of the page, right? When you move on to things like JavaScript and that, you'll reference them more as elements and you'll forget about the word tags. But you'll hear me say both. Right? So we have the HTML element, there's the start and there's the end. Inside each HTML page, each proper one, you'll have a head and a body. The head should always come first, and then the body below. Just like you and I, our head is on top and our body is below. If it's the other way around, you're doing some parkour stuff, and that's cool, but it's not what we're doing. Next, we have a meta tag, all right? And this is just telling that our character set is UTF-8. Right? Strictly speaking, it is not required because your browser is going to figure it out. But anytime we can put information in to help out the browser so the browser has a little bit less work to do, that is going to make our pages better. Right? So we're going to put that character set in there, say that it's UTF-8, and that's all we're going to do with that. Then we're going to have the title, right? And the title of this page is Hello World. So we have the beginning of the title, the end of the title, and now we have something inside some text, Hello World. Have you ever been to a web page? And I'm sure you have. The tab at the top of your browser probably had some words there. That's the title. You get to set that for every page on your website. If you're creating new pages and you're just copying and pasting from other pages, you'll probably have the same title all over the place. If you're using a content management system, like maybe a WordPress or something, it's going to build the title for you per whatever the coding of that theme is. If you're a theme developer, you can make it say whatever you like, but we're doing it by hand. So for this page, it's just going to say Hello World. This is the first page on my example website. Right? Then I have some styling, right? Some style. We're going to come back to this in a moment. We're going to move on and we're going to come back to the style because we want to talk about what it is that we're styling first. Okay. So that's the end of the head. We have the slash. That means it's the end of this element. There's the beginning and there's the end. Then we have the body below. So the body, this is the part of the web page that we actually see. So far in the head, with the exception of the title, nothing else is visible to the user when they're looking at your website. So there's a lot of things that may end up being in the head. Things like JavaScript, styles, and some other metas, that kind of thing. And so, side note, we all know what the definition of meta is, right? This is data about data. So the meta for your web page is about your web page, how to display your web page. We're using the character set UTF-8, that's data about data. And then we continue on with the actual data of the page. Right? So everything in the body is the part that we're actually going to see. And then, of course, the very first thing in the body is something they're not going to see because I've specifically said this is a comment. You'll see these string of characters before and then this string of characters after. Anything that you put inside is a comment that's there for developers, you and I, to see, but the visitors are not going to see this. Right? It's not hidden from the visitors. They do have the ability to see the code of a website. Right? So if they wanted to see the comments, they could, and I often do that myself. And as you're developing, you'll do that as well. But most users are not looking at the code of a website. The vast majority are not, and so they're never going to see the comments. So you could call them stupid heads in here, and they'd never know. But generally, the comments are just useful to us. They let us know what the thing is that's coming up. So my comment just said comments go here because I'm explaining what comments are, and that's it. So this exact string of characters have to go the beginning and end of a comment. So if I miss one of these dashes, it's no longer the end of a comment. And so this comment started, but I didn't end it. And you'll see it grays out the entire rest of the page because I didn't properly end the comment. So be careful about that. Same thing goes if I mess up the start of the comment, if I remove any one of those characters, now it's no longer a comment and this will actually display in my page. So I don't want that because this is a comment. Right? It doesn't matter which character I remove, right? If I don't get this exact string of characters at the beginning and the end of a comment, it's no longer a comment and it will be displayed. So moving on to the next one, I have an H1 tag or an H1 element. Right? There's beginning and the end. It says Hello World. And what an H1 is, this stands for heading level 1. So an H1 is typically the biggest, most prominent piece of text on that page, usually the title of the page. Okay. And And then if your page is divided into subsections, though each of those subsections will probably be an H2. Right? And if you have multiple levels of sections, as you go down, hopefully you don't go past level 6 because we only have H1 through H6 available to us. After that, there are no more H elements in HTML. You'll have to either keep reusing number 6 or make something else up if you go more than 6 levels deep. I've never ran into that trouble. You may or may not. So this is an H1. This is the top level heading on this page. It says Hello World. And the next thing on here is a P tag or a P element. P stands for paragraph. And you'll find many, many of these on pages. Anywhere there's a paragraph. Paragraphs are block level elements. H1s are also block level elements. There are two different main types of elements in HTML. We have block level and inline elements. A block level, like a paragraph tag, will take up all of the available width that's given to it, and it will force a carriage return at the end. So if I have two paragraphs are not going to be next to each other. One's going to be on top and one's going to be below. And those are block level elements. If I have an inline element, the classic inline element is called a span. Those can go inside of paragraphs or inside of anything, really. A span is simply a span of text that you want to look different. Maybe you want to highlight it red or something. In a span, that is an inline element, and those will appear in line of wherever they are. So you can have spans next to each other. You can have, and that's how spans are. They'll fit actually inside of a paragraph, maybe just one or two words, right? So that's a classic inline element. So we have a paragraph here. I could put a span inside of it. I don't want to overcomplicate our first example, though. I have just an H1 and a paragraph. And now let's actually go back up to this style that we skipped in the head. So styles in HTML, we use something called cascading style sheets. And the cascading part of that means that we can actually code or write multiple styles for the same element, and they will cascade down. Every time you write a style for an element, as you read farther down into the code, into the page, HTML is an interpreted language. So as your browser reads farther down into the page, it will apply those styles. So if I have 6 styles written for the same element, your browser is actually going to apply the first one and then continue reading the code, apply the next one, apply the next one, and so on. And if any of those override a previous style, sometimes they are the same style written over and over again, just with different values. Sometimes they're different styles. So you could style the font size and the background color. They don't interfere with each other. Or you could style multiple background colors. So every time one is interpreted by the browser, it will overwrite any previous ones for that same element. So that's how they cascade. Right? Styles also have basically power levels as well. So you can write styles that can and cannot be overridden based on their points value, and we will talk about points value for styles later. For now, we're just going to look at what a style looks like and how to write them, how they work. If you're doing this in Dreamweaver, Dreamweaver has the CSS Designer, and you get to use the kind of the drag and drop, click some buttons, and it will write the code for you. At the moment, we are going to look at the code, but we'll take a look at the CSS Designer as well. So the first style that I have, it's a style element in the head. This is not the only way to do styles, but this is the way we're doing it for now because it's the easiest. So I have a style for the body element. And so the body, you can actually write a style for the HTML. You can write a style for the head, although not sure why you would because the head's not visible. You can write a style for the body, or you can write a style for any of the elements in there. And you can write styles with parent-child relationships as well, which we will get to. So we're writing a style for the body, and we said the background color of the body is going to be this hex value. Now this hex value, hex always starts with the pound sign or the hashtag for you younger folks. This one is 0099FF. First two digits are the red value. Next two digits are the green value, and the next two digits are the blue value. It goes from 00 to FF. That's 256 possible values, power of 2, right? So this has no red, a fair amount of green, and all the blue. So this is green and blue mixed together, actually makes cyan or light blue, because the blue is that dark blue, right? So this is going to be a light blue background color on the body element, and so the body is all of the visible page. So the entire page is going to be this light blue color. Moving on to the next style, the H1 elements. Now this is not just this H1 element, but any H1 element on the page. If I were to create many H1s, they would all get this style, okay? It is going to be position absolute. So now I'm actually taken and change the position of this element. The normal position of all elements is something called static, whereas as it appears in the code, that's where it gets displayed. There's no modifications made. This particular element, I'm positioning absolutely, which means I'm actually going to give it like an X and Y value as an absolute position from the top left corner of its parent element. Okay, and that's important. Its positioning is always in relationship to the parent element of the element that you're positioning. For our purposes, the H1 is the parent element is the body, so it's going to be just positioned according to its parent, the body. So absolute position, right? This is going to be width 100%, so 100% of the available width to it. That's how wide it's going to be, which is how wide an H1 element always was. But when we do absolute positioning, it does kind of mess with the width and the height. So I've redefined the width to be 100% to make absolutely sure that it is. I've said the height is 1 EM. There are a lot of different potential values. So we use percentage already. EM is actually the width of the capital letter M. If the height is 1 EM, or actually maybe the height of the capital letter M, whatever the case is, 1 EM in height terms means that the height of this H1 is actually just going to be the height of whatever the font is. 1 EM is very common. It just means it is one font height. Okay, that's the easiest way to describe that. Now I have some positioning, a left and a top. The left position is 0 pixels. So now I have 100% width, and the left of that H1 is going to be 0 pixels away from the left of its parent. Okay, so basically it's just going to be all the way to the left. And then the top of this is 50%. So the top of this H1 is going to be 50% away from the top of its parent, which is basically the middle. All right, it's not exactly the middle, and that's because it is 1 EM high, and I made the top 50%, so it's just below that 50%, right? By like half an EM, right? So then I have the margin, okay, the margin, this is the space around the element. The margin is negative 0.5 EM. So just like I said, that top 50, but the height is 1 EM. Now I've pushed it back up 0.5, but margin is all the way around, right? So I pushed it up 0.5, and I've also pushed it left 0.5. I can fix this by giving a different value for the margin for top, right, bottom, and left. So let's do that. I only want the margin to be negative 0.5 on the top margin. And right now I've set, when you do 4 values on things like margin, things that have 4 values, you always start at either the top or the top left corner, depending on if your attribute is a corner thing or if it's a side thing, right? So it's going to start at the top and then work around clockwise. So this is the top margin, negative 0.5, and then all the other margins are 0. Now you might be wondering, why didn't I put 0 pixels or 0% or 0 EM? In HTML, when you have a 0 value for something like a margin or a height, something like that, 0 is going to be 0 no matter what the units are, whether they're pixels or percents or whatever. So I tend to just put 0. Right? It's going to be the same no matter what the units are. Right? It's just a little bit of a shorthand and saves me from typing px. Okay. So now that really is going to be right in the center, and I've changed something on my page here. Next, my text align or text alignment is centered, which means that, remember, my H1 is 100% wide, so now I have aligned the text centered. We can align left, we can align right, we can align center. We can also justify. For our purposes, that wouldn't be very good. I only have 2 words, but if you were doing an entire paragraph and you wanted to justify them, that's something you commonly see in newspapers where the left edge lines up and the right edge lines up, and they put spacing in between the words to make it fit. So those are some text align options. And then I've changed the color. Okay, so in the body, we did background color equals this light blue color. In the H1, I did color. So there isn't a background color and a foreground color. There's a background color and a color. And so color is foreground color, or color is text color. Okay. So this color is another hex value. We have 00, FF, and 44. So this is going to be nothing in red, all the green, and a little bit of the blue. So this is going to be a green with just a little bit of blue. It's pretty much just green. All right. So that's all the H1 styles. And I did make a change to the margin, and you can see I have a little circle right here. It says that I have some changes and I can save. So I'll just hit Control S to save. I'm going to minimize my Sublime Text, come into Dreamweaver, and Dreamweaver gives me this message. The file was modified outside of Dreamweaver. Do I want to reload it? Remember, I changed that margin. Yes, I do want to reload it. There's that margin change. And now let's have a look at the design view of this page. Right? So we can see this is what it's going to look like. There's our paragraph up here in the top left. Our paragraph did not have any styling, so the default is appear in the first available space wherever you appear, right? And also it's going to have no background color and a color of black. That's the default. We've told our body to be this blue color, and we've told our H1 a lot of things. It's going to be green. It's going to be position absolute, halfway down the page, 100% wide, center text. And so this is the design view of Dreamweaver. Let's have a look at the live view. It's going to be the same thing, but the live view, this looks a little bit more, doesn't have that option right there. But I can click on some things. If I click down here, I can click on things in the live view. So we're not going to get hung up on that just yet. That's a different video. We'll head over to the split view. When you click on things in here, it's going to highlight where it is in the split view. Also note that when I click on things in Dreamweaver, so now I'm on the H1, all the way in the bottom left, I have this little breadcrumb of what I have highlighted. So I have the H1 and its parent is the body. Okay. Always keep an eye on that when you're navigating either the live view or the design view in Dreamweaver. It'll let you know if you have actually clicked on the element you think you clicked on. So we've gone through all of that. Now let's have a look at some Dreamweaver stuff. If you're not in a Dreamweaver class, you can skip ahead, or if you're just interested, keep an eye out. So we're looking at the CSS Designer, and we have sources. Okay, so the only source we have is that style right here in the head. That's the only one available to us. And so I have that clicked, and then these are the styles that we have written. We don't actually have an inline style, but because I clicked on it, we could add an inline style. That's what it was offering me. So I have styles for H1, right? And these are the H1 styles. Let's see if I can get this more visible here. There we go. So these are the properties of H1. I have a width set to 100%, and I could change that here. I have a height, my margin, right? Remember we typed that margin in, but in Dreamweaver, I could type in each of these values right here. And I could click the little trash can to get rid of some of these values. We have a lot of options with some of these 4 value things. We could set one value, which would be used for all 4 of them. We could set an X value and a Y value. So we could set 2 values. The first one would be the Y value, and the next one would be the X value. The reason for that is, remember, we always start at the top and we go clockwise. So the first one would be the Y for the top and bottom. The next one would be the X, or the right and left. We have position set to be absolute, and then we have our top and our left. And we have a text color and a text alignment set. And those are the only things we have set. If we wanted to set some more, we could come in here and do some more settings, but I'm going to leave that for a different video. Let's have a look at our page. Actually here, remember I did make that change. I did not refresh the page. So here is our hello world. I'm trying to put my mouse right there, and then refresh, and we see that it shifted just a little bit because we fixed that margin. So here we have our centered H1 hello world. Up here we have our paragraph tag. We did not style that at all, remember? And that is our, maybe our very first HTML page. That's what the code looks like. Here's our Dreamweaver split view with our CSS Designer. So please have a, if you're in the Dreamweaver class, have a look at the CSS Designer. Right? If you don't have a source, you would click on the plus sign to add a source. You can create a new file, attach an existing file if you've made a file already, or define in page. Define in page is the one that we did in this page right here. Once you actually have a source for your CSS, that's where is the CSS written? Where does it exist? Where does it come from? That's the source. Define in page, what we'll be using in the beginning sections of class, because it is the easiest. But once we get some bigger things, what we're going to want to do is define it in one file. And the reason for that is we can have one CSS, one style sheet, that powers multiple pages, and we only have to change it in one place in order to make changes across our entire website. So we'll start here and we'll move on to that next one. Right? And if you are taking just the coding version of this class. We have a look at the code, and we will do the same thing, but we will type it all by hand. If you're in the Dreamweaver class and you want to type everything by hand, when I look at it, I might not know. You can do what you like. Okay? I don't have a hard and fast rule about that. If you want to type it all by hand and you don't want to use Dreamweaver, go ahead. You're just, you're going to be wasting time when I tell you about Dreamweaver. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.